The portal exits are stacking up for UCF, but how much do the last few hurt?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend, James Duncan, UCF sports commentator extraordinaire, to talk a little UCF football here on a Monday evening. We're coming at you guys double-sided here. We dropped one this morning. We're dropping one in the evening. We're going to be dropping multiple pods on days all off season, covering what I like to term portal madness. It is portal madness out there for a lot of schools. On today's show, we're going to talk about a couple of recent portal entries for UCF and what that means for the roster. And then at the end, we're going to talk about what it all means for Scott Frost at the end of the day. I think his mission is clear. The assignment is clear for Scott Frost. Today's show is brought to you by our title sponsor, guys. Game Time, the best place to buy tickets. Head on over to Game Time or get on your mobile device. Download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Let's start at the top here. James, you tweeted about this and maybe stirring some stuff up. You're always starting stuff on Twitter, man. I can't turn my back on you for 2 seconds. Derek LeBlanc, he gone, hits the portal for UCF. He follows John Walker, also who hit the portal recently. It is that time of year. 'Tis the season to start portaling, and UCF players are doing this. This is to be expected. Now, on a previous show, you and I talked about those. When you have success on one side of the ball, you're going to see guys leave. Look, I don't know if the stats are gaudy here, but LeBlanc to the portal, man. Talk to me about what this means for Alex Grinch's defense.
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot. John Walker is a big loss for this team. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit on a previous episode, but he might not have had the production that you really wanted to see from him this year. But most of it is because he was drawing a lot of attention as a defensive lineman. When you draw a lot of attention as a D tackle, your numbers are going to plummet, but your team is going to be more successful around you. I would consider the D line a pretty successful unit this year. I think most people would. So it's definitely a shame. A local kid went to Osceola High School with his fellow friend, Derek LeBlanc, who also went to Osceola High School, spent a semester at Oklahoma before coming back to UCF and returning as this hometown hero combo between two guys that played together in high school. It's a little upsetting to see guys that you recruited that have that hometown hero label hop in the portal. And those guys were best friends, man. I'm sure they still are. There's a lot of connection between those two guys when they're on the field. They play pretty well with each other. I would not be surprised, like I said, if these guys go somewhere as a package deal. It's not necessarily unheard of that even coaches will get involved in a package deal with a player. But players have been doing this for a couple of years now, Mike, where they will go as a package deal. UCF has multiple sets of twins on the team that, twins oftentimes like to play football together. But a lot of times these guys that they grow up playing high school football together are like brothers and they want to play football together, Mike.
James, stop beating around the bush, man. Give us the tea. You said in your tweet that they could be going to a school UCF fans hate, not USF.
Yes, it is not. It is not,
going, man.
It is not USF, but I can guarantee you that UCF fans do not like this school. We've played this school. We've lost to this school. We've won against this school in a bowl game, guys. I can't just come out and give you the letters of this university, but most UCF fans can put together the pieces of this hurtful puzzle and come out the other side with a pretty solid answer. It's upsetting because John Walker was heavily recruited by this school out of high school. UCF made an insane push in his recruitment with Gus Malzahn, and we were able to land him. Retaining him was a huge aspect of the past 2 years after having a breakout season freshman year, facing an injury all of last year. And then this year, obviously not putting up necessarily the biggest statistical season, but a lot of necessary production for the defensive line. Guys, this is a massive loss with him and LeBlanc both leaving at the same time. Now Andrew Rumpf leaving. That is 3 of your D linemen in the portal, which is a unit that you were looking at being pretty strong going into this offseason, assuming that the retaining was going to be there. And now you're looking at a crew that you might have to go get some guys in the transfer portal. You're left with Horace Lockett. You're left with Rodney Laura. You're left with RJ Jackson from Tulsa, who, guys, all 3 of those guys were all big performers last year. But you need more, Mike. You need more.
You do need more. Now, let's talk about, again, money. I'm not sure money has much to do with either of these that we're talking about. I want to be clear. On a previous episode, you and I talked about that 20.5 UCF fully funded as far as rev share is concerned. So there's money out there to go and get the guys that they want to keep. But on another episode, we talked about retention over acquisition. And I do want to make sure that we set some context for our listeners here. UCF currently ranked 67th in recruiting per rivals. Right. I'm sorry, per On Three rivals right now. It's both of them. But also, it's a smaller high school class of only 14 kids in this class, which means while the portal taketh, the portal is going to have to giveth a little bit back to UCF. And if you're Scott Frost, you got to hit the portal. And I think on the defensive side of the ball, though, you've got really good proof of concept to go out and maybe get some really good linemen here. Alex Grinch's defense was a highlight for UCF this past season. I don't think it's really debatable. Those guys kept them in games. And, you know, I heard somebody argue to me, well, they weren't much of a threat offensively. So you saw people maybe play a little conservatively offensively versus UCF's defense. I'm not buying that. They created havoc and turnover on that defensive line. They went out and they got turnovers in the secondary. We saw good play all over the field for UCF here in Scott Frost's first year with Alex Grinch at defensive coordinator. But still, retention, I think, has become so much more important with how money is being spent here. Now, I talked to a UCF administrator about this very idea, about the investment that's going into these rosters, and how another athletic director at a major Power 4 conference told me this at a media days. He said, you know, the days of schools stacking top 15, top 10 classes year after year after year may be over if they can actually enforce the cap rules. Now, you're seeing schools get really creative about getting around those cap rules, James, but ultimately you want to be able to retain year over year, especially when those guys are productive and you know what you have. And if you've got money to spend, you're spending it on known and verifiable production. So I think that's why this hurts here. If they're guys that are known to you and they're guys that performed here, you want to keep those guys while you develop those incoming linemen, and then you start to create a pipeline here. But if you're losing those guys, then those guys that you're bringing in have to be on an accelerated timeline to mature, or you're going to have to go to the portal and see if you can find some mature D linemen to come in until those other guys get up to speed. Look, LeBlanc isn't the only guy that's going to hit the portal here for UCF. Again, it's stacking up here. We're going to get to the break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about who else is hitting the portal right here next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. The holidays are here, and whether you're hosting family, planning a perfect gift, or just trying to keep things simple and delicious, Omaha Steaks is making it easier than ever. From effortless holiday entertaining to unforgettable gifts, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience straight to your door this holiday season. What makes it even better? With Omaha Steaks, you know exactly what you're gifting. USDA certified tender steaks, premium proteins, gourmet sides, and decadent desserts that make everyone feel appreciated. I love how easy it is to gift. It shows up frozen, packed beautifully, ready to cook. They have so many options: steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, desserts, something for every kind of holiday gathering. Save big on gourmet gifts and holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks, guys. Visit omahasteaks.com, and for an extra $35 off, use code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. All right, so defensive lineman loses Leblanc. We talked about John Walker on an earlier episode. He also hits the portal, but on the other side of that line, Carter Miller is out. He's got the belly button all out here in this picture. He's ready to party. Carter Miller is ready to party. He's just ready to do it somewhere else in 2026. Talk to me about Carter Miller. He was part of a much maligned offensive line this season. I would argue that they were probably the worst position group on the 2025 version of UCF. And you want retention. I know I just went a whole diatribe about retention. However, how much does this really hurt, do you think?
I mean, I don't think you'd have to argue with anyone about who was the worst unit on UCF's football team this year.
They were pretty bad at times.
It was pretty clear, between that and quarterback maybe. But definitely hurts you a little bit. I think Carter definitely graded out higher than some other guys on your offensive line this year. And he's also one of your only starters that was potentially going to come back or had eligibility to come back. I think the only person that started a game this year that has the opportunity to come back is offensive lineman Preston Cushman and the young guy in Owen Spell. Other than that, you're losing your entire line. Last year it was like, plugging holes in the ship. This year you're getting an entirely new ship. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't necessarily think that removing the entire offensive line is going to help you, considering one of the main things about offensive line is learning how to mesh, learning how other guys play. And when you're only having to plug one hole, it's easier for one guy to figure out how to mesh with four than for five guys to figure out how to mesh with each other. I don't know how well this is going to work. I'm a little confused by Carter Miller hopping in the portal. The guy was very committed to the Knights. If you go look on Twitter, he had a knight tatted on him. That's how pumped he was to play right down his side. He was very excited to play for the UCF Knights. Now back in the portal, frustrating, I think, for a lot of people to see a position that has been such a rotating carousel for the UCF Knights ever since I think Matt Lee is the last solid center that I can think of for the Knights, who left ahead of the 2023 season for Miami, ended up playing really solid for them. And since then, we've had multiple guys play for the UCF Knights at center. They've started, I think, 7 centers over the past 2 years. I remember Drake Metcalf, who went to Virginia, Bula Schmidt, who came from Fresno, Lakahi Paoli, who was here for a couple of years, Caden Kittler, who transferred to Arkansas, Marcellus Marshall, who came from Kent State, I think now went to Minnesota, Carter Miller, who was here this year, and Cam Kenny, who was here this year as well, just to kind of rattle off a couple. But that's been a real rotating unit, Mike. I mean, to have that many quarterbacks and that many centers starting for you over just the past 2 years.
Yeah. On UCF's starting offensive line, Carter Miller was the worst graded offensive lineman in terms of pass blocking per Pro Football Focus last season. In terms of run blocking, he was also the worst starting lineman with a grade of 62.9. And he was the center.
So I take what I said back. I'm okay with the lack of retention here.
Like, yeah, I'm saying I get it. Like a ton of snaps played, right? But in terms of how he graded out, at least the PFF. This is a little bit subjective when we talk about these grades,
Sure.
but per PFF, he was the worst graded starting offensive lineman here. Your center is a very important piece on that field offensively. Depending on the system, a lot of coaches look at the center as kind of like that second quarterback on the field that gets guys in position, calls out protections, helps make sure that you are in the right place at the right time, man. And like I said, it's a much maligned unit, cannot be understated. This was a group that lost their position coach tragically this season. Our hearts go out to Sean Clark and his family. But you've got to reset and retool if you're Scott Frost here on offensive line. If you don't have at least average line play, I'm telling you, it almost doesn't matter who you put back there at quarterback. It's going to be a tough road to sled, especially in an offense where they want to pass the football at a decent rate at least, and you are struggling to protect and give them that extra half second that good quarterbacks need to be able to go out there and find a guy. Again, I'm all about retention, but you need good retention. And if you're Scott Frost, you had to kind of just do what you had. But that's why the weaker high school numbers kind of suck to me, right? Like, man, you'd like to see a full class of like 20 to 23 kids in there coming in from high school so that you can have that slow build to year 3 or 4 where it all kind of comes together for Scott Frost. If not, the portal becomes so important for you. And I can't say this enough. There are not a ton of really, really good linemen just sitting around in the portal for you to snatch up. The good ones are going to established programs that are already winners. So, they're going to have to become really adept at finding maybe some diamonds in the rough here, James, on offensive lines. Really going to test that eye for evaluation. Before we move on, last word on the offensive line here and replacing Carter Miller.
Yeah, the portal is as big as ever right now. And I don't know if you guys follow some transfer portal accounts. I know I do to try and stay, as up to date as I can. And I have my notifications on for one of them because, that they post pretty frequently. And my phone is buzzing all day long, because this is probably going to be the biggest transfer portal entrance from any year of college football that we've seen. NIL has gotten to the point where it is now just going to continuously fuel the transfer portal until either somebody shuts, the NCAA puts some regulations on it, or it just keeps growing. And it gets to the point where you are now playing this semi-pro level of football, and every single person is a 1 to 2 year player or are signing long-term contracts. It is going to get out of hand. It already has gotten out of hand, I believe. But guys want to make money. And for most guys, they know that the statistical probability of them getting to the NFL is very low. So they are going to prioritize what their family want them to prioritize. They're going to prioritize what they want to prioritize. And they are going to prioritize what their agent or someone close to them is telling them prioritize. And that, number one, is pretty much always money. So with that, I wish luck to Carter Miller. I wish luck to Derek LeBlanc and John Walker and every single other UCF player that has gotten in the portal. I hope they go out and they make some money and get some playing time somewhere. But it is just going to be this way for the near future, Mike.
Couldn't agree more. Listen, let's get to our last break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what it all means for Scott Frost and UCF right here next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, the best place to buy college football tickets, World Cup tickets, any tickets you're looking for. But We got to tell you guys, the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. Let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when a great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. You get panoramic seat views even. It's a great way to know what you're buying before you buy it. Prices include fees up front, which I love. No last second prices at checkout. Alerts for teams and matches make it easy to go grab tickets the moment they drop instead of missing out. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, tip it, go. Game Time. What does it all mean for Scott Frost and the UCF Knights here? As I mentioned, the portal has really changed the game for a lot of schools. And look, it's almost like a second recruiting window right after you just close the last recruiting window. So you get your high school class in December, and then in early January, you're back out doing a different kind of recruiting, trying to see who's in. Guys are announcing their intentions to enter the portal right now. However, you're not allowed to contact guys currently on teams at this moment. So representatives are being reached. The rules are being circumvented. Teams are getting creative about reaching out to the guys. And I tell you, I talk to a lot of parents who tell me, Mike, I'm getting calls from X school and X school and X school about my kid here. If you're Scott Frost, it's a double-edged sword where you have to fight off the invisible opponent that's reaching out to agents and parents and doing everything they can to reach the kid without talking to the kid. And then you got to go out and you've got to kind of do the same thing. And we cannot be as naive to think that, I think the biggest thing with the cap rules and the biggest argument that I've gotten from certain schools representatives around trying to stay within those cap rules is that they don't think it's enforceable. And what you're going to fall behind in recruiting while other teams are stacking talent for something they've proven that they cannot enforce. I had a conversation with Greg Sankey, commissioner of the SEC, about this at one media day as we sat down, and he said, Mike, I'm so frustrated because we put in the guardrails that these coaches asked for. And then after they got them, that the first thing they immediately did was found ways around the rules that they asked for. And if you wanted to spend yourself into oblivion, just say so, and we'll have them remove the guardrails and let you do that. Now, I don't think that that's the answer because it's going to erase the parity that we created. Look, man, we have a college football playoff with James Madison and Tulane in it. You remove the guardrails, those teams might make it, but they're going to get obliterated once they get there because they're not going to be able to compete with certain schools and their budgets. And, look, man, I would say Texas Tech has kind of been on again, off again, good at football. But with a $1 billion backer and being in the Big 12, they might be more on again than off again with as much money as they have to spend at football. What does this all mean for where UCF stands? I want to be clear. We did an episode, James, where we talked about UCF and whether they had the money to compete. University officials reached out to me to clarify UCF's place in all this. And they were like, look, man, Mike, we're fully funded, 20.5 fully funded, right? Enforce the rules and we'll find a way to compete with our coach and with this staff.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. UCF is fully funded to their $20.5 million cap for all sports, with a majority of going to football. Every single Big 12 school, I believe, is fully funded to the 20.5, and it has a majority going to football. I would be surprised if people don't know this, or people have been living under a rock, but there are schools finding ways around this. There are schools doing large brand deals or having large backers. And I think there is a general frustration around, UCF donors or the UCF fan base, that it seems like, and I want to make this very clear.
Okay.
I think Scott Frost is a phenomenal head coach, and I think that he is a phenomenal play caller. I think he is going to be a great recruiter here. I think the way that he does things is different than the previous staff. There are certain things I like. There are certain things I don't. That's going to be how things are with any coaching change. Frost wants people to play by the rules, and he is going to play by the rules. And unfortunately, what he has shown in the way that he has talked about UCF and the new era of NIL is that these things are frustrating. And he says college football is broken. Yes, I think most people would tend to agree that college football at this moment does feel broken. But, you can either sit there and say college football is broken, or you can try and pick up the pieces and try and make something out of it. And I think that's what he's doing now. And I think there needs to be some sort of grace period, because people don't realize you don't get your team until the third or fourth year of being a head coach, because those are guys that you recruited and you got out of the transfer portal and you developed, and you don't really get that until the third or fourth year. And so I don't think that I'm saying next year is not going to be a success. I don't think that I'm saying that we can't make a bowl game or any of these things, but Frost is going to need to be able to adapt. Think about it. The last time he was involved in college football at Nebraska, there wasn't a truthful NIL setup. He was in the NFL when all of this was becoming more legalized and introduced. And so this is all new to him. And so he does have staff around him that know about these things, but there's a massive learning curve when it comes to NIL. And I know that personally from being involved in that industry. There is a huge learning curve. And with people that are ahead of the learning curve and people that are innovative and people that skirt the rules a little bit, those people are going to be successful in the short term. And they will be successful in the long term if the NCAA continues not to enforce these rules.
Yeah. James, UCF brought in a ton of kids through the portal. I think almost 40 kids through the portal last year.
There were almost 70 brand new players to UCF last year.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make sure, because my question to you is, what does this portal class look like? Some of the names that came in through the portal this last season here, and this is going back to December. Carter Miller, who is now out. Lewis Carter, who we love and hope dies a UCF Knight. Jade Bellamy, Sincere Edwards, Dylan Wade, another guy we talked about, Jaden Nixon, Taven Jackson, guard Memolar, Philip Dunham, Jaden Williams, Chris Domerkamp, Horace Lockett, Davi Belfort, Kelly Lawson, DJ Black, Rodney Lord, Jaden McDonald. These are all names that made plays. Marcus Burke, DJ Bell, Cam Fancher, who won the starting job, Preston Cushman, Max Drag, Noah Rules, Cole Kozlowski, Dwayne Thomas Jr., DJ McCormick. Good grief, man. That's a lot of playmaking that you brought in through the portal for you last year.
Without a doubt. And Mike, something very important to note is you went and regardless if you went 5-7 this year, you had multiple opportunities, not including the BYU game, because that's where everyone was like, oh, this is the decider. Of course that was the decider, but you were on the 1 yard line at Kansas. You had multiple opportunities in other games during the season, at the space game, at other games in the season. You could have easily at any point in the season have gone 7-5. You had talent on this team this year. You definitely faced injury attrition, and I understand that is going to happen. Does it suck that every single year it happens at quarterback? Absolutely. And at offensive line? Absolutely. You had ballers like Sincere Edwards and Horace Lockett go out this year and still somehow manage to have a very solid defense, setting those guys up next year for very, very good seasons. You brought in ballers. You brought in Noe Ruelas, who brought finally some sort of balance to the UCF special teams kicking unit, who we feel like we haven't had in ages. You brought Dwayne Thomas Jr. in. You brought Cole Kozlowski in from Colgate, who was an absolute baller. You brought in, Cam Fancher, who won the starting job, and all the other quarterbacks. You brought in DJ Bell, who had a great year, Bellamy, who had a great year, Jaden McDonald, who had a great year, Rodney Laura, who had a great couple games, Horace Lockett. All of these guys made plays this year. You know that you can go out and find portal talent, and they did that on a shortened timeline.
Yeah,
I'm actually really, really intrigued to see who they go and find, Mike. I mean, this could be really big for UCF fans.
Well, you know that they've got like an NFL style board of guys that they want to go after. Look, man, I'm sure back channels are being worked, and they know they may not be reaching out to guys because UCF does things by the books. They would never tamper. However, you do know who's going to be in and who's going to be out for the most part, and you're having to build NFL style scouting, departments to go out and identify talent. You've got legit GMs that are helping you build a roster and identify talent that's going to be available, and then positioning yourself to be in the conversation for these kids. Look, man, you got to find a home. You got to find a home for the spring quickly. I like what they did, cutting out a window and making sure that guys are in for spring ball. And so to kind of erase some of the summer madness, this is going to be an absolute, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a wild portal season once this opens. And look, man, everyone's going to be scrambling. If you're Scott Frost, you got to get organized. You have to make sure that you know who your guys are, and make sure, look, defensively, I think they've got really good proof of concept in terms of what they were able to accomplish here in a season where they only won 5 games, but you had some games that were close. Offensively, what you have is you have opportunity. You have the opportunity for a starting job for someone who wants to come here. You've got some decent receivers for them to throw to. You're going to have to put together a line, because, if I'm a top QB in the portal, I don't know if I want to come play behind what that was last year. But, if you can sell, hey, look, man, that's just what we did on a shortened timetable. Now we've got a full year in this thing. We're going to go build it better this spring, for the spring going into summer and fall camp. This is where you've got to show off. This is where you have to show off your organizational skills, your recruiting skills. Look, man, he's got to be Rico Suave out here in the portal recruiting in this second thing, because like I said, December has changed so much. We had this conversation when we talked about these teams like turning down and foregoing chances to play in bowl games. You've got a lot to do in December. So unless you won 6 games, and even for some of the teams that won 6 games, they're like, look, man, we only won 6 games. So we're just going to go ahead and look to 2026, and y'all can have this bowl invite. Let somebody else play in it while we get organized and try to get better and get prepared for that portal to open in early January. This is a fascinating discussion. I cannot wait to continue this discussion with you, my friend, as well as with our good friend Andrew Gloko, senior writer at UCFKnightZone.com. He's going to join us tomorrow and talk a little bit more about this right here. We're going to get more announcements. Lock in with us, guys, after the video. Hit the comment section. Let us know what you think about LeBlanc and Carter Miller hitting the portal. How do you feel about this staff going into the portal season? Do you think they're going to be able to capitalize? We want to hear from you. Thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Myself, James Duncan, Andrew Gloko, we'll be back at you guys tomorrow and all through the week right here on Locked On UCF.